Hey, I'm David Pyle. I'm an artist, and I love telling stories about art and art making, not just because that stuff's cool, but also because it inevitably leads in a whole bunch of other directions. It takes us into science, it takes us into culture, it takes us into history, it takes us into math, and all kinds of other cool places. So, do you remember last time we talked about that brilliant red color, carmine, which was invented by the Aztecs or developed by the Aztecs, and then the Spaniards came in and they stole it, and the pirates stole it from them, and then it got used for a whole bunch of other purposes? Well, I want to talk about another painting that's tied into that. So here we go. Here's this painting. Gosh, I love this painting. These beautiful red roses. Oh my gosh. The poetry and the rhythm in this painting and the brush strokes and that color red, it's just, there's so much passion. There's so much romance. What? What? Wait, come on. So I'm kind of in the middle of something here. Seriously? They're white? No, 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 no. Can't be. Can't be. Roses are always red in paintings because they're telling stories about romance and passion. And roses are always red. It's like in the poem, roses are red, violets are blue. I mean, if they're white, then the poem would have to be roses are white, violets are azul. If you think this is right, then maybe go back to school. No. Yeah. Okay, so how did this happen? Oh, oh. So this painting has been sitting out. It's been sitting out in light for like 150 years, and it's faded. Well, that explains it. Okay. So I'm going to need to tell our friends about this so they understand what's going on. So thanks for letting me know. We'll catch up later. All right. So this is a little interesting twist, isn't it? Remember we talked earlier about surprises? So here's a surprise. Let's talk about why some paintings and some pigments fade. Okay, I gotta grab my molecule models, which every painter keeps in his or her studio, right? So I've got a couple of molecule models. I've got a basketball. What's the purpose of this? You're going to see in just a minute. Let me get rid of my chair. Let me get a stool. Now, for the purposes of our discussion today, this is a photon, and a photon is a packet of light. This is how light comes to us on planet Earth. It comes in from the sun, bounces through the atmosphere, bounces off things around us, bounces off of you, bounces off of me, and the things that it bounces off of, when it bounces back out at a particular frequency or wavelength, or better, it's a way of wiggling. This photon is moving in a particular way. Now, when the photon bounces off of something, it can come into our eyeballs. It hits what's at the back of our eyes called a color cone. And those color cones are also tuned in a particular way. They're tuned so when they get hit by light that is also moving at a particular frequency, they will resonate. They will wiggle too. And as they wiggle, they send a signal about that wiggle. That almost rhymes. They send a signal about that wiggle up the optic nerve into our brains, and our brain says, hey, that's red, or that's blue, or that's white, or whatever the color may be. So for the purposes of our demonstration, let's say that this is a pigment particle. This is a molecule that's part of a pigment. Now this itself, this is called a benzene ring. Benzene rings themselves aren't pigment, but they make up as a component other parts of things that may be a pigment. So we're going to put this pigment down on a painting surface. You ready? Here we go. Boom. Now, here comes the photon. It comes in through the atmosphere. It bounces around on different things. It bounces around in my studio, and then it goes boom, right, whoa, right onto the pigment molecule. And what do you think's happened to it? Nothing. This is a pigment that has the structural integrity to withstand the constant bombardment of light energy. Let's look at this one. This is a pigment particle, or a part of a pigment particle, that is similar to what was in that red, that carmine that we talked about in the last video and that I introduced this video with. So this particle is a little different. It doesn't have the double bonds. It has just a couple of little bits holding it together. Let's put it down on the painting surface. Let's see what's going to happen. I know it looks like a poodle. It is not a poodle. Think about it as a pigment particle. Here comes the photon, bouncing through the atmosphere, bouncing around in my environment, in my studio, and right onto the pigment particle, and what happens? Boom! It's in pieces. So what happens when that photon bounces off of these pieces? It no longer bounces with the same frequency. And if it can't bounce and come back out at the same frequency, you're not going to see the color that it was to begin with. That is how that painting by Van Gogh faded. Now, question for you. If you're a painter or an artist or just somebody who likes making stuff with color, should you be worried about whether or not your paint is going to fade? I can't answer that question for you. That's something that you're your authority on your own artwork, so it's up to you. But we're fortunate in that today, the manufacturers of contemporary paints make paint that is much more permanent and is much more like this than it used to be. That's the story of how color fades in paintings. So next time, we're going to talk about an interesting painting that includes this brilliant, brilliant blue. And you see this guy leaping up in the air. This is a god named Bacchus. We're going to talk a little bit about where this painting came from. We're going to talk about the pigment that was used to make that brilliant blue, because there's some exciting stuff to talk about there. And oh yeah, we're going to talk about with oil paints, which is what this painting is made from. We're going to talk about how oil paintings all over the world are getting fat. They're gaining weight. How can that happen? Reinforce your walls. Make certain the museums will hold up, because they're gaining weight, and we're going to have to deal with that. And we're going to talk about that next time. Until then.